Today, we're talking about mass and balance. This is a crucial topic for your DGCA NAV exam. I've consistently seen about 5 questions from this section. But don't worry, everyone makes this topic boring. I'll make it interesting so you can easily secure those 5 marks. So there are multiple ways of measuring an airplane's weight, each useful for different purposes. Let me explain how I was taught, which really helps you remember all these weights. Imagine you're a captain and your company places an order for a plane. My favorite is Airbus. So they ask you to pick it up. You fly to France. Nice little vacation, right? You visit the Airbus factory and there it is. A fresh plane straight from the factory. So what's in this plane? There's no fuel yet, no passengers, no annoying kids crying in the back. Even you and your crew aren't in it yet. Just the basic things which come with the plane. This basic weight is our first term. Basic empty weight. BEM. Obviously, the aircraft itself comes in this weight. It's like a car, right? It needs maintenance. And since it's huge, there's also a lot of lubricating oil and hydraulic fluid. There's also all the electronics which never seem to work in Air India, though they're improving. The new aircraft in Air India are amazing. The A350 is just oof. Okay, let's focus back on BEM. The safety stuff is also included. Fire extinguishers, oxygen cylinders. And it's not like Airbus never put fuel in the plane. They must have tested it a lot before bringing in an important person like you. But although there's some fuel stuck deep in the wings that cannot be removed, you cannot use it to run the aircraft. This unusable fuel is considered in the basic empty mass. So BEM includes aircraft structure, lubricating oil, hydraulic fluids, unusable fuel, electrical equipment, safety stuff like oxygen cylinders, fire extinguishers. You don't have to remember everything, but if you see anything like this in the exam, mark it. Also, BEM is sometimes known as tare weight. Just another term for it. A second type of weight is DOW, dry operating weight. Now the Airbus manager welcomes your crew on board. You and your crew get in the aircraft. From now on, imagine you're using this plane for service, exactly how you would if you were flying with passengers. So you and your crew come inside. That's around 2 pilots, let's say 4 cabin crew, without getting too much into regulations. That's like 6 people, and you didn't come empty-handed, right? You have luggage, plus all the shopping you did in France. Now BEW plus crew's weight, plus crew's luggage. And also your crew needs some things to prepare the aircraft for service. They need a portable water tank so they can have water on board for the crew and passengers. They need food, catering supplies, and lavatory chemicals. These all come under dry operating weight. Still no fuel, still no passengers. DOW is also known as aircraft prepared for service or aircraft weight with no usable fuel and payload. This is important because in exam questions, sometimes they won't mention DOW directly. They might say aircraft without fuel and payload. So you have to understand it's DOW. The next weight is zero fuel weight. It's basically whatever is in DOW. But now passengers are in, everything is there except fuel. Okay, this is a lot of information in such short time. So before we move on, let's quickly recap the first 3 weights we've covered. First, we have BEM, basic empty weight. Remember this one? It's your fresh aircraft, straight from the factory. No crew, no passengers, nothing extra. Just the bare aircraft with its structure, all the lubricating oil, hydraulic fluid, electronics, which hopefully work, safety equipment like fire extinguishers and oxygen cylinders, and that unusable fuel stuck in the tanks that you can't even use to turn on a light. This is also sometimes called tare weight in your exam. Next is DOW, dry operating weight. So now you and your co-pilot are on board along with your cabin crew. That's about 6 people total. You've all got your luggage. Your crew has also prepared the aircraft for service with portable water, food, catering equipment, and those lavatory chemicals. But still no passengers and no usable fuel. In your exam, they might call this aircraft prepared for service or aircraft weight without fuel and payload. So watch out for that wording. And finally, we've got ZFW, zero fuel weight. Now your passengers have boarded with all their bags. Everything and everyone is on the aircraft except for usable fuel. Got those three? Great. Now let's move on to the remaining weights. After zero fuel weight, we have two more important weights to understand: ramp weight and takeoff weight. Both of these weights include fuel on board. And fuel on board consists of trip fuel, alternate destination fuel, and reserve fuel. But here's the simple difference. Ramp weight is when you're sitting at the ramp with all your fuel on board plus extra taxi fuel, because you need this fuel just for taxiing to the runway. Takeoff weight, TOW, is your weight when you're actually on the runway ready for takeoff. It's zero fuel weight plus fuel on board, but not taxi fuel, because you've already burned that while taxiing. Think of it this way. When you're at the ramp, you're heavier because you have all that taxi fuel. By the time you reach the runway, you've burned some fuel just getting there, so you're lighter. That's your takeoff weight. Okay, guys, let's take a quick pause here. This is a lot of information to process at once. Feel free to grab a coffee, rewatch this section if needed, and make sure you understand these weights before moving on. These concepts are critical for your exam, so take your time. Now let's talk about maximum weights. Don't get scared, these are just the safety limits. Before I start talking about it, watch this video.
Thank you all for getting here. Because of so many of you, it's a pretty heavy aircraft we've got today. That heavy aircraft combined with a fairly short runway here in Lanzarote and some winds which aren't particularly favourable at the moment mean that with the current environmental conditions here in Lanzarote, the aircraft is too heavy at the moment to depart. Now,
in the clip, you can see a pilot making an announcement asking for volunteers to take a later flight. This happens because the aircraft is too heavy due to winds and environmental conditions. This is a perfect real-world example of when weight limitations become critical. There's a maximum takeoff weight. When you're on the runway, let's say your aircraft manual says you should weigh 80 tons maximum. But you're at 81 tons. You've exceeded your max takeoff weight, so you need to remove fuel. If you can't do that because of safety reasons, because you, as a smart pilot, must have calculated the right amount of fuel, but you're still overweight, it's time to remove some luggage off the plane. That's why sometimes luggage comes on the next flight. If that's also not enough, you might have to ask some passengers to take another flight. Now, there are two max takeoff weights. Maximum takeoff weight is what we discussed. Let's say for an A320, the maximum takeoff weight is 80 tons. That's the structural limit set by Airbus. Performance limited takeoff weight applies when conditions aren't ideal. Let's say it's raining or wind isn't in your favor. The aircraft's max takeoff weight considers normal conditions. If it's raining, you need more runway length to fly. So now you consider performance limited takeoff weight. In bad conditions, this might drop to 75 tons. So what is RTOW? It's regulated takeoff weight. It's basically the lowest of MTOW and PLTOW. If PLTOW is lowest, then use PLTOW as RTOW. In our example, since 75 tons is less than 80 tons, your RTOW would be 75 tons. Also remember these important formulas for your exams. MTOW equals TOW plus fuel on board plus payload. This part of the formula where it says fuel on board plus payload is known as useful load. That's what creates money for the airline. A trick to remember. DOW plus fuel on board is called operating weight because DOW is basically aircraft ready for service. And when you add fuel to it, you can start operating. That covers all the theory needed for mass and balance. I'll upload the second part about solving numerical questions in the next few days. Subscribe and like to support my channel. Remember, this topic typically appears in 5 questions on your DGCA NAV exam. So mastering these concepts will help you secure those marks easily. Thanks for watching and good luck with your CPL training.